I remember that night with a clarity that still makes my stomach twist. The chandeliers threw their golden light across the ballroom, every glass clinked like a signal of celebration, yet I sat there feeling like a shadow. It was my sister's engagement party. She stood at the center of it all, glowing her fiancé at her side. Then came the words that still burn in my ears. Clara, maybe you should learn how to keep a partner before thinking about inheritance. At least half of Dad's $1 million estate will go to us anyway. Laughter rolled through the room as if cruelty was entertainment. My fingers tightened around the folder resting on my lap, the thin paper inside carrying the photocopy of my father's will. Nobody knew I had seen it. Nobody cared that I was even there. I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes it is the only armor you have left when words are being used as knives. I looked around. The tables were full, the champagne flowed, and yet no one sat beside me. I was 30 years old, a woman with a steady career in marketing, with savings that had taken me nearly a decade to build, and still in their eyes, I was the one who had failed. I was the one to mock in front of 100 guests. The loneliness felt sharp, but I wore it like a second skin. On the surface, I smiled faintly. I even raised my glass, though the bubbles burned my throat. That is the thing about family gatherings. Everyone pretends to be happy, pretends to belong, pretends not to hear the barbs hidden in the laughter. Inside, I felt the weight pressing down the years of being invisible, in a family that measured worth in marriage and titles, not in effort or integrity. But I told myself, hold on, this part matters. Because what they didn't know was that I had already seen the cracks forming. I had seen the emails my sister sent to her fiancé making plans to manage the estate once our father was gone, plans that involved me signing away my share. And I had seen the smugness in their smiles when they thought no one else was looking. Still, I said nothing. I let them laugh, let them raise their glasses, let them think they had already won. I want to pause here and ask you something. Families and money, what a dangerous mix. Tell me where you are watching from, and do not forget to subscribe. We need to talk about this, because what happened next will sound almost unbelievable. That night, when the party ended and everyone was drunk on champagne and self-satisfaction, I drove home alone. The city lights flickered across my windshield, and in the silence of my car, I whispered words I had not dared speak aloud in years. I deserve better. I did not know then that this thought would shape everything that came after. I only knew that something inside me had shifted. The morning after the engagement party, I woke with the taste of bitterness still clinging to me. My phone buzzed nonstop. Photos from the celebration were already flooding social media. My sister in her glittering gown, her fiancé holding her hand, their friends commenting, perfect couple, perfect future. And then buried in the stream of tagged posts, a video clip. My sister's voice rang out clearly. Clara, maybe you should learn how to keep a partner before thinking about inheritance. The crowd's laughter followed like thunder. Someone had caught the moment on their phone and uploaded it. Strangers who had never met me were already commenting. Some laughed along, others called me pathetic. My humiliation had gone viral overnight. I scrolled until my eyes hurt, then tossed the phone onto the couch. That was when I noticed the folder again lying there on the coffee table. The photocopy of the will inside was sharp and final, a reminder that things were not as they seemed. They wanted me to believe I had no claim, but paper and ink said otherwise. At work that day, I forced myself to sit through meetings, nodding at marketing projections and campaign pitches. My colleagues chatted about weekend plans, engagements, new houses. I smiled politely, but inside I kept hearing my sister's voice mocking, cutting, rehearsed, almost like she had been waiting for the moment to humiliate me. That evening, my parents called. My mother's voice was sweet at first, asking if I had made it home safe. Then she shifted her tone firm, almost rehearsed. Clara, you need to understand that inheritance is for the stable ones, for those who can build families, who can continue the name, not for dreamers who live alone. I bit my tongue until I tasted iron. Stable, dreamer, alone. The words stacked like bricks around me, building a prison of judgment. Later that week, a family dinner was arranged, informal, they said. I went because part of me still believed. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe they would soften. But as soon as I entered, I knew. The looks, the whispers, the way chairs pulled closer together with no room left for me, it was all deliberate. I sat near the end of the table, the laughter and chatter flowing like a river I could not step into. The clink of cutlery, the smell of roasted meat, the polished silver, yet I was invisible. Then it happened. A projector had been set up to display a slideshow of engagement photos, but instead of roses and champagne flutes, an email flashed across the screen. My sister's voice reading aloud had been replaced by her words in writing. "We'll make sure Clara signs off on her part. She won't fight if we corner her." Gasps. A nervous laugh from someone at the far end. My sister rushed to shut it down, fumbling with the remote, muttering that it was a mistake. My parents' eyes darted around, but nobody spoke directly to me. They all pretended not to see, not to hear. And there I was, sitting with a glass of water in my hand, pretending too. Pretending I had not just been erased in front of them all. I smiled faintly, because sometimes smiling is the only way to keep from screaming. But deep down, I knew something had broken for good. They wanted me silent, compliant, humiliated. They thought I would stay at the table eating scraps of dignity while they carved up everything that was left of our family. They were wrong. I drove home that night with my hands clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white. The roads were empty, yet inside my head the noise was deafening. Laughter whispers my mother's words. "Inheritance is for the stable ones," over and over again, as if she had rehearsed the line just to cut me down. When I reached my apartment, I didn't even turn on the lights. I just sat on the couch in the dark, staring at the city skyline through my window. Those towers of glass and steel seemed so far removed from my own life, from the mess of family politics and poisoned love. I thought about everything I had done, every dollar I had saved, every late night at the office, every careful choice that allowed me to stand on my own 2 feet. None of it mattered to them. To them, I was still the one without a ring on my finger, the one who didn't count. And then came the final twist of the knife. A friend sent me a screenshot from my sister's social media. She had posted a photo from the engagement dinner captioned with a cruel smile. "Some people live off dad's money, some of us build real futures." The comments piled up, laughing emojis, inside jokes, heart symbols from her fiancé's friends. I read it twice, 3 times, until the words blurred. It wasn't just a slip of the tongue at the party. It wasn't just one heated remark. It was a campaign, a deliberate effort to erase me from my father's legacy. The betrayal wasn't only from her. It was from all of them: my mother, with her dismissive tone, my father with his silence, the guests who laughed instead of objecting. They had already decided that I was unworthy. That night, I pulled the folder out again. I spread the papers on the table, tracing the lines of my father's signature with my finger. The will was clear: equal shares. No conditions about marriage, no clauses about being stable. It was black and white, undeniable. Yet they wanted me to believe otherwise. They wanted me to hand it over quietly to vanish, like I had never been part of the family at all. I sat there until dawn, the city waking up around me, and something hardened inside me. I realized I could never change how they saw me. I could never beg enough or prove enough to make them treat me as their equal. So I stopped trying. I decided that morning, as the sun lit up the skyline, that I would no longer play their game. I would no longer sit at their table waiting for scraps of respect. Instead, I would leave them with their laughter, their schemes, their illusions, and I would begin my own quiet form of revenge. When people talk about revenge, they usually imagine fire and fury. Shouts across crowded rooms, courtroom battles, or explosive confrontations that make everyone gasp. But my revenge began with silence, with the kind of calm that makes people nervous. The timing worked in my favor. After the engagement party, my sister and her fiancé left for their honeymoon, and my parents joined them on a short trip to Europe. They wanted to celebrate their future in-laws in grand style, and they assumed I would be sitting quietly at home licking my wounds. What they did not know was that I had already signed a lease for a new apartment across town, a modern place smaller than theirs, but all mine, with clean lines, big windows, and a view of the river. On Monday morning, I called a moving company. By noon, a truck was parked outside my building, its back door yawning open like an invitation. I was precise about what I packed. Every piece of furniture I had bought myself. Every book, every dish, every photograph that belonged to me alone. I left behind the things they had ever given me. Small gifts meant to look generous, but always carrying a chain of obligation. I wanted no trace of their control in my new life. It took 2 days to complete the move. The movers came and went, the neighbors watched curiously, and I answered no questions. I was meticulous, surgical, almost detached. By the end, my old apartment was nearly bare. What remained was hers, my sister's forgotten sweater. A vase. My mother insisted I keep old wine glasses left after one of their gatherings. I arranged everything neatly in the living room as if presenting evidence in a trial. And then I wrote the note. just one sheet of paper placed on top of an envelope. I went on my own journey of discovery. Turns out I discovered I deserve better. Your belongings are in the living room. The lease ends in 3 weeks. Speak with the landlord if you plan to stay. I found myself, and myself does not include you. Good luck with your plans. I signed it with my first name, only nothing more. Before leaving, I walked through the apartment one last time. The walls echoed with emptiness, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I slid the keys onto the kitchen counter, placed the folder with the photocopy of the will on top of my sister's things, and closed the door behind me. That night, I slept in my new apartment on a mattress still wrapped in plastic. There were boxes stacked to the ceiling and no curtains on the windows, but I felt something I had not felt in a long time: peace. 2 days later, the first email arrived. What the hell is this? I came back early and you're gone. This isn't funny anymore. Where are you? I did not respond. By the end of the week, more messages filled my inbox. Pleading, angry, self-righteous. My sister complained about not being able to afford the old place alone, about the landlord demanding she sign the lease. She accused me of manipulation, of emotional cruelty. She even claimed her fiancé thought I was abusive. I read every word and closed every message without replying. Because here was the truth: she thought she had left me humiliated. She thought I would crawl back desperate for their approval. But instead I had left her standing in the ruins of her own arrogance, holding a note she could never erase. And that silence, more than anything I could have shouted, was the sharpest revenge I could have chosen. The silence didn't last long. By the time the week was over, my absence had become the loudest voice in the family. They had expected me to shout, to argue, to plead. Instead, they came back from their honeymoon to find an empty apartment, a note, and no Clara. That quiet tore through them more than any outburst ever could. My sister was the first to break. She sent a dozen emails in one night, each one more frantic than the last. You can't just leave like this. We are family. The estate is ours. You're ruining everything. At first I ignored them. Then out of curiosity I opened one and found that she had attached a spreadsheet she and her fiancé had made. Rows and columns of imagined numbers, renovations for a house they didn't yet own, investments they planned to make, with money they hadn't inherited. And my name crossed out in red. It should have hurt, but instead I laughed. They had been planning their future on the assumption that I would simply hand over what was mine. They didn't even bother to hide it. The next morning, my mother called. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but something in me wanted to hear her voice. She didn't start with love. She started with accusation. How could you embarrass us like this? Do you know what people are saying? Your sister came back to an empty apartment. You left her with nothing. I took a breath. She has her fiancé. She has you. She has her spreadsheets. She has plenty. You are being cruel, my mother snapped. This is not how family behaves. I wanted to tell her that family had already betrayed me long before I ever packed a single box. Instead, I hung up. But that wasn't the end of it. The humiliation they had given me at the engagement party began to turn on them. Someone had uploaded a clip from that night, the exact moment my sister raised her glass and sneered. At least half of Dad's $1 million estate will go to us anyway. It spread across social media faster than fire on dry grass. People I didn't know sent me links. Headlines popped up: bride to be mocks sister over inheritance at her own engagement party. The video hit 1 million views within 2 days. Strangers dissected every detail: the smug tone, the laughter of the guests, the way I sat there smiling faintly while holding my glass. Commenters called her cruel, heartless, spoiled. Others wondered aloud if I had left, because of that very moment. And for once, I didn't feel invisible. The irony was brutal. My sister had wanted the world to laugh at me. Instead, the world was laughing at her. She sent another email late that night, its words sharp but shaky. Take it down. Make them stop. You're ruining my life. But here's the truth. She had posted enough of her own arrogance on the internet that no one needed my help to spread it. Her own cruelty had become her undoing. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. By the second week, the calls and emails took on a different tone. No longer rage, no longer frantic demands. Now it was desperation covered with a thin layer of blame. My father called first. His voice was measured, almost weary. Clara, this has gone too far. Your sister's reputation is being dragged through the mud. People at church are whispering. Old friends are calling us asking what happened. You need to fix this. I let him speak. I listened to his sighs, to the way he stumbled over the word fix. What he really meant was, come back, play the scapegoat again, absorb the shame so your sister doesn't have to. When he paused, waiting for me to apologize, I said nothing. The silence stretched until he gave up and ended the call. Then my mother tried again. Her voice was sharp, brittle, like glass about to break. You're making us look heartless. Is that what you wanted? To destroy the family's image. You know how people talk in this town. I nearly laughed. The same woman who told me inheritance was for the stable ones now begged me to protect their reputation. I wondered if she even remembered those words or if she believed cruelty could be erased once the world began to notice. Meanwhile, social media only grew harsher. A popular gossip site picked up the story Inheritance Scandal Family Meltdown at Engagement Party. They published screenshots of my sister's viral post, the one mocking me as a spinster, living on dad's money. The comments were merciless. Strangers were calling her shallow, spoiled, entitled. And through it all, I remained silent. I didn't release statements. I didn't argue online. I didn't defend myself or attack them further. I simply watched as the image they had worked so hard to polish cracked under the weight of their own arrogance. One evening, as I unpacked boxes in my new apartment, I received a final email from my sister. The subject line read, "We can fix this." Inside, she wrote, "Let's meet. We can figure out the estate together. But you need to stop being so dramatic. Family comes first." I stared at the words. Dramatic. As if years of being dismissed, mocked, and erased were nothing more than a tantrum. As if leaving was an act of theater instead of survival. I closed the laptop without replying. They still didn't understand. This wasn't about image. It wasn't about money. It was about finally stepping out of the role they had written for me and writing my own instead. And I wasn't done yet. I knew it was only a matter of time before I would have to show my hand. For weeks I had watched them stumble, desperate to control the story, scrambling to cover their shame. But the truth had been sitting quietly in my possession the entire time, waiting for the right moment. One morning I walked into my lawyer's office. The receptionist gave me a polite nod, and a few minutes later I was sitting across from a man who had seen countless families torn apart by money. He read through the folder I had brought, the photocopy of my father's will, the emails, the screenshots of my sister's social posts. He tapped the papers into a neat stack and leaned back. "Your father's estate is clear," he said. "Equal shares among the children. No mention of marriage, no conditions of stability. Nothing they've said to you has any basis." I nodded. I had known this, of course. But hearing it confirmed by a professional felt like a stone lifting from my chest. He went on. "If they continue to pressure you, you have every right to defend yourself. The law is on your side, but whether you choose to fight them publicly is up to you." I thanked him and left with the folder tucked under my arm. Outside the city was buzzing taxis, honking people rushing to work, the smell of roasted chestnuts drifting from a cart on the corner. Life went on indifferent to my private storm. Yet I felt a clarity I hadn't known in years. I decided not to confront them right away. Revenge, I had learned, is not about striking first. It is about waiting until the silence grows heavy enough that every word you speak will land like a hammer. Weeks passed. My sister's engagement photos lost their sparkle online. The comments remained brutal. Invitations to her wedding grew scarce as people distanced themselves from the scandal. My parents whispered about repairing the family name, though never directly to me. They wanted me back, but only as a tool to restore their image. And then came the gathering, a family meeting, they called it. My sister insisted on it, one last attempt to make things right. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at my parents' house. The living room looked the same as always, overstuffed couches, heavy drapes, the smell of furniture polish. My sister sat upright, her fiancé by her side, their hands clasped too tightly. My mother fidgeted, with a set of pearls at her neck. My father kept clearing his throat. "Clara," my sister began, "we've all said things we didn't mean. The stress of planning a wedding, dealing with the estate, it got the best of us. But we're family. We should be united." I let her finish. Then I placed the folder on the coffee table and slid it toward her. "Open it." She hesitated, then flipped through the pages. Her face drained of color. My mother leaned in, scanning the words. My father stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. "It's the will," I said. "The real one. Equal shares. No conditions. Everything you told me was a lie." For a moment the room was silent, but for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. My sister's fiancé shifted uncomfortably. My mother tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. And there's more, I said. With a tap, I played an audio file. Their voices filled the room, my mother and sister plotting how to corner me, how to push me into signing away my rights. The sound of their own betrayal echoed back at them undeniable. I looked each of them in the eye. You wanted me erased. You wanted me humiliated. But the truth doesn't bend to your arrogance. No one replied. For the first time, they had no script, no laughter, no smug remarks, only silence. And in that silence, I knew the power had shifted. The silence in that living room stretched so long that it seemed to choke the air itself. My sister sat rigid, her fiancé's hand slipping from hers, as if even he wanted no part of the mess she had made. My mother's pearls clicked nervously between her fingers. My father, who had spent his life avoiding conflict, stared at the carpet as though the pattern could swallow him whole. For once, I wasn't the invisible one. I leaned back, calm, steady, and let the silence do its work. Then I spoke each word deliberate. You thought you could erase me. You thought I would fold under your laughter, your whispers, your lies. But I didn't just find myself, I found the truth. And the truth will not be ignored. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was a paused video, the viral clip from the engagement party. My sister's face frozen, mid-sneer glass, raised voice dripping with arrogance. Play it again if you need a reminder, I said softly. Her cheeks flushed crimson. You ruined me, she hissed. No, I replied. You ruined yourself. I just refused to cover it up this time. My father finally looked up. His voice was low, almost pleading. Clara, we can still put this behind us. Families forgive. We can keep this private. Private. The word tasted bitter. That was always their way, bury the shame silence, the inconvenient child smile for the neighbors. But that era was over. I stood gathering the folder and sliding it back into my bag. I don't need forgiveness, I told them. I don't need your approval. I only need what's rightfully mine, and I will claim it without your permission. I walked toward the door, but before leaving, I turned back one last time. You wanted me invisible. Now the whole world sees you for who you are. That's not my shame to carry anymore. The door clicked shut behind me. Outside, the air felt lighter, cooler, as though I had finally stepped out of a house that had been burning for years. In the weeks that followed, the gossip only grew. My sister's wedding plans collapsed under the weight of scandal. Guests withdrew, vendors canceled. Her perfect image shattered. My parents retreated from public life, their phone calls fewer each day, their voices weaker each time. And me, I built something new. My new apartment slowly transformed into a home, curtains on the windows, books on the shelves, photographs of places I had visited alone and would visit again. I took long walks by the river, watched the city lights shimmer at night, and for the first time in years I felt whole. Revenge had not been fire and fury. It had been quiet, deliberate, patient, and it had left me free. If you think Clara made the right move, comment right. If you have a better way, share your idea.